So thank you very much. This is one of those moments in a year where a lot of emotions come together. There's a lot of work that goes into this. My team is here today. We spent a lot of time talking this through. I think when we talk about the budget presentation, this is my 4th year as superintendent, and I felt like the really important thing we should do first is take an opportunity to kind of look at where we've come. What is the last 3 years? So I'm going to do my best to talk slowly. I know that when I get going, I talk really fast, so I'm going to try my best. This is a lengthy presentation, so forgive me ahead of time. So let's take a look back. Prior year's accomplishments. And so when we look at that, I think it's really important to look at the prior 3 years under kind of the 6 lenses: safety, positive relationships and character, fiscal responsibility, excellence in learning, equity and support, and student voice. So when it comes to safety, what have we done? What are the things we should be proud of? We implemented Navigate 360, which included mapping and digital photography at every one of our schools. That's a great tool for our first responders to be able to have in the event that there was an emergency, and also allows them to see kind of buildings ahead of time. They can actually go into every classroom, see what the classroom looks like. We added the school resource officer at Marshall Middle School, and then we made the SRO at Marshall High School full-time. We improved the entrance at Marshall Middle School, the physical access controls. We implemented ATLAS, which is our violent critical incident response process and program. Implemented ongoing collaboration with Southwark and LA police departments and fire departments. We're meeting with them actually Tuesday, I believe, to do a walkthrough of the high school building itself. Installation and maintenance of the PFAS system at Marshall Middle School. So remember, we had all the PFAS water testing that we had to do. We were able to actually create a water system, which was really cutting edge at the time, where we are now 100% compliant with PFAS from our wells, which was really great news. Lead testing was performed in all portable water. All certificate foundations were found. We are 100% compliant. We finished that up over break when we actually had the field house taken care of. That was kind of the last area. And then we added the digital security cameras to all of our buildings. Before that, we did not have any outdoor cameras, and so this was a simple thing that we had done. Positive relationships and character. We manage a global pandemic in the mindset of connections before content. That doesn't mean that content's not important. What it means is you go back to what Maslow would tell us, that we need that safety, that belonging, that people can't fully blossom until they have those roots laid into the ground. Something we really, as a district, spent some time talking about and really working through our philosophies. We had a philosophical shift in our school counseling program at all levels. Addition, new student services hub at Marshall High School, and so why is that important? So we created a space at Marshall High School where students who might need some support could go there at any point during the school day. There would be an adult that they could talk to and get the services that they need. It's a student-centered place. Prioritization of the student advisory and responsive classroom across the district. So our advisory program and responsive classroom was a key tenet to that engagement and belonging that we want to work with across the entire district. And then we enhanced our outdoor learning opportunities. Student voice. We systematically prioritized every opportunity to seek student voice out whenever possible. And so when something comes up, we say, look, how do we activate students to be able to get their perspective on things? Sometimes that's hard. That's a challenging thing. Sometimes they say things you don't want to hear, but the reality is you need to be good listeners, and we are in a student-centered business. Actively seeking out student voice in school board policy committee meetings, hiring administrators and coaches. So we include students in those processes. Seeking opportunities for student government to be involved in the operations of our building. Our principals meet with our student government to say, folks, what do you think? What are some initiatives what are the concerns that you have? What are some things you'd like to see in the buildings? Reaching out and building those relationships. Soliciting student feedback and program of studies in the science curriculum at Marshall High School. Recently did a survey and said, what would you like to be having at the science class? What does that need to look like? What is the interest that you have as a school? Take the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey. That's an opportunity for student voice. We find out what our students' needs are. Inclusion of student members for 3 different food service, included 3 student members in our food service selection committee. So we brought students in from different buildings and allowed them to be part of that selection process. Great things came out of that. Gluten-free was an area that we didn't necessarily talk a whole lot about, but was really important to students. We heard that voice as part of that process. And then I think the continued support and enhancement of our civil rights teams. And this is a snapshot. These are kind of some of those big things as we kind of went through. Excellence in learning. We expanded summer programming that emphasizes academic and social emotional growth. So years ago, it was really kind of those students with reading, and so we've expanded that greatly. In addition, we never used to have a program at the middle school, so now we not only have a middle school program to get some remediation in math, reading, and literacy, but also the social emotional support students might need. How do we build those connections back that were lost during the pandemic? We increased capacity to use data and to drive instruction with the NWA state assessment systems, and so we've created district data teams where we sit down and talk about student data. We talk about it on an ongoing basis with our administrators. We make that a focus of what we do. We expanded multiple pathways to access learning by increasing outdoor education and extended learning opportunities. So the ELO position, we were able to get some grant funding for that. So we're expanding what does that look like? How do we customize that learning for students in a meaningful way? Remove systemic barriers that may limit students' educational opportunities. What are those things that are just in place because that's the way we've always done business? And looking at those types of things and saying, look, is this helping students or is this hindering students? And really having those tough conversations sometimes. Because sometimes the adults say it's important to have a process, and the kids are saying, well, why can't I do that? And that's a really good question, why can't I do that? And that we have to question ourselves. We implemented a new math program, pre-K to grade 5, illustrated math in the Bridges math program. Implemented a new SEL program, pre-K to 5, with teach our Komochis, which we did a presentation on. I feel like we struck gold with that. Implemented the SEL curriculum at Marshall Middle School and Marshall High School through our advisory program. So both the middle school and high school invested a great deal of resources into creating that advisory program, and including the SEL, the social emotional learning parts of it. We're continuing, and this is an ongoing work, but we are revising that district health curriculum. That's an ever-evolving facet of work that we need to do. And ongoing professional development with all administrators to ensure that excellent instruction is happening in every classroom. We spend time watching videos together, talking about instruction, talking about what we see from teachers. How do we have those conversations? Equity and support. Ongoing professional development to ensure that MSAD35 community feels safe, heard, and valued in our schools. Safe, heard, and valued. Those are really important terms that we talk about all the time. Safe, heard, and valued. Implementation and evolution of the multi-tier systems of support. So we talked about the MTSS program. That's a real shift. That was one of our goals this year. Let's continue that work in there. Partnered with Count Me In and added attendance ambassadors to address student absenteeism. So Count Me In is a program statewide that we are activating through a grant that allows us to be able to find better ways to get students to come to school. How do we engage families in those conversations? And so we want, schools to be a place where you come. We don't want, kids to come into school and say, here's a pink slip, you're bad because you're late. We want to say, we're happy to have you here. We want students to be at school. Real-time math intervention in pre-K to grade 5. We did not have that a few years ago. So now if students are struggling, there's points during the day where we have professionals that can work with those students. Implicit bias training is part of our hiring process. Everybody who's involved with the hiring process now, there is an implicit bias video that they need to watch just to make sure that we're always being mindful as we go into the hiring process. Utilizing our Hawk Buddies program to allow older students to support our younger students through mentoring. Hiring additional social workers to support the needs of our elementary school students. I just want to be clear because I think sometimes we use the word social worker and people get a little bit confused. So we hire our social workers for really two main purposes. One is that we work with students who need that through an IEP or a 504 plan. Those are the students. So it's not that kids just walk in and say, I need counseling services. So we do our 504 and our IEP students, and then with the extra time, we facilitate getting outside resources that are necessary for a student to be successful. That's challenging in this environment right now, to be frank with you. To find counselors, to find social workers, it's difficult at a private level, but that is the mindset. So it's not, we're not giving up free counseling services. That's not at all what it is. Addition of extended learning opportunities coordinator at the high school to provide additional opportunities for students outside the traditional classroom. Fiscal responsibility. This is a mouthful, so forgive me. In fiscal year 2020-2021, the district was using $870,000 from the fund balance to support the budget. The strategy was designed to spend down district savings in order to limit the tax assessment every year. So basically, we were taking out of our savings account to be able to pay for the current year's issues. Over several years, that strategy shrunk our fund balance significantly. The money in our savings went away. As a result, the district's ability to manage cash flow placed the district in a situation where we're not exceeding our overall budget. So we had, budgetarily, we had enough money. The problem was in that in July, when we're having all of our projects done, or when we're hiring, or when we're buying all of our supplies for the school, we were spending faster than that money would come in. We weren't able to do that. That created problems for us. And also managing a 3-paycheck month. So that created some cash flow issues for us. In addition, over time, our district facilities budget was drastically reduced, which resulted in a reactive approach to repairs and maintenance. And so in order to keep supplies and staff in the classroom, we had to cut back on our facilities. There were decisions that we had to make at that time. But what happened because of that is that rather than being proactive, we had to go into a purely reactive mode. We have shifted that, so our resources now, so we try to be more proactive and systematic when we look at our facilities. And we are happy to say that we've eliminated the use of fund balance as a budgetary strategy. We're trying to slowly rebuild our fund balance in order to mitigate further cash flow issues. So every year, if we have money left over, we put that in the bank. And that allows us to not have to worry about borrowing money or those types of things. So when we left the budget meeting last year, I expressed concerns about that 2.5% not necessarily being a sustainable model for the future. That's something that we're really concerned about. When that was created, approximately 10 years ago, it was a very much different allocation of money and funds for our district, and so the sustainability of that was very concerning. We added $130,000 to our capital reserve. I guess we probably should have mentioned this, but we didn't even have a capital reserve 4 years ago. So now we have a capital reserve. We're able to put some money away if we ever run into a situation where we need to have things fixed. We put $50,000 for a special education reserve. So we took $50,000 to say, look, if we ever have a high-cost out-of-district placement that we're not prepared for, there's money in the bank to be able to manage that. And then we also involved a strategy where we took $100,000 and created a fuel reserve because we weren't sure at this point last year what the cost of fuel was going to be. So we remember we had the extra vote that was done at the budgetary meeting that if we needed to, we could access that $100,000 out of our fund balance to be able to manage that. And then, this is kind of one of the realities is that, we received a lot of grant funding related to COVID, and we knew that coming the 2023-2024 school year, those monies were going away, something we had to be aware of as we went forward. Where are we today? Current enrollment is, 2,121 students with a total operating budget of $34 million approximately, $34.3 million. And so when we start thinking about building the budget, we've got to really have a student-centered perspective. And so when we talk about that, what does that look like? I bet you know the answer. Mm-hmm. We're going to use our strategic plan. And so that's the lens that we're going to look at. So before we even start building the budget, let's talk about kind of what are those challenges as we go into the year that we want to keep in our mind as we start to build things. So these pictures are really neat. These are all pictures from across the district. So just when you see these kind of like little side pictures, these are pictures that Ryan and Becky Williams took a bunch of them for us to be able to add to the presentation. I think it's really neat. On a personal note, I love seeing the kennel of hawks. That's something that we started 12 years ago at the middle school. I'm so happy to see that it's still alive. That's pretty cool. Academic needs is one area that we want to talk about challenges. So ensuring that all students have the opportunity and support necessary to learn the skills and knowledge in the main learning standards. That's the big idea, right? That's the big idea. What's one of the challenges? Over the past 2 years, our special education identification rate has increased to over 20%. There's also been a significant increase in students requiring higher level of services than the district can offer, those out-of-district placements that we talk about. We've also seen a dramatic increase in the cost of those out-of-district placements. That's a challenge. Social emotional needs. Anxiety and mental health concerns continue to impact the MSAD35 community and across the country. Our mission is for all members of our school community to feel safe and supported so students are able to reach their full potential as healthy individuals, citizens, and lifelong learners. Again, big ideas. Staffing issues. This is startling. Recruiting and maintaining highly qualified staff remains a challenge as the labor market remains super competitive. Drivers, administrative assistants, food service positions, and educational technicians are particularly challenging to fill and retain. Since July 1st, our non-teaching positions, so let's take teachers out of the equation, but our drivers, our ed techs, we have seen 75 positions have turned over in that time. 42% of our non-teaching positions have turned over. That's a startling number. Not only does it impact the classroom, but it impacts human resources, impacts our payroll system. And I know that we're not alone with the hiring issues and the retention issues. Ryan said this to me the other day. He said, "You know that Central School is going to be 100 years old soon?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh!"
Wow.
So our facilities continue to age every year. It's funny how that works, like us all, right? Sometimes people forget the age of our facilities. The Central School is approximately 100 years old. We're getting there really quick. Our new high school is almost 25 years old now. And investments in keeping building maintenance are costly. It's not cheap. And I just think it's always important to kind of come back to these facts. These are things that you don't think about, because you think of a school a certain way, but there's also kind of the business aspect of it, the facilities aspect of it. It is a big undertaking. Our district manages 5 campuses, 3 properties in South Berwick, 2 properties in Elliott, and a leased transportation facility in Berwick. These campuses encompass approximately 124 acres, all maintained by the district. On these 5 campuses, the district operates 6 buildings totaling almost 450,000 square feet. The overall appraised value of those facilities is approximately $80 million, and that's from our insurance company. That's where that number came from. Maintenance and operation of these facilities is costly. Each year, the district purchases 125,000 gallons of propane, 12,000 decatherms of natural gas, and 2.6 million kilowatt hours of electricity. So you just talk about just the energy consumption itself, big numbers. Economic factors. The current economic climate has drastically increased the cost of goods and services. A simple example. An example of this is our electricity supply costs recently increased 161%, an increase of almost $170,000. And I want to be clear, like, that's not just us calling C&P and saying, hey, what are they going to charge us next year? That's us actively going out, working with a group of schools to be able to get the best bid that we can. And this was the lowest. This wasn't even the highest. This was the lowest. Fiscal responsibility. Our community expects a quality education at a reasonable cost. Balancing higher costs of goods and services for programmatic decisions that impact our students and staff in the classroom is something we grapple with every day. It's a tough balance. We're trying to balance that on the tip of a needle. So how do we build a budget? So wood from the wood shop. Pretty neat. This is kind of a picture of the wood shop itself. So every year we start with 0, we build a budget based on student needs, and that starts with our enrollment. Examples of zero-based budgeting practice, we'll talk about that a little bit, but here's a guitar that a student's made out of wood, because this is what's happening in the wood shop. Pretty neat. So where do we start? Let's start with enrollment. So we talk about our enrollment in 2023, which is where we currently are. So Marshwood High School, 689 students. Our projected enrollment for next year is 676 students. Marshwood Middle School, 479, 470, and you can kind of see that. The dots represent our staffing, and so our staffing is remaining relatively flat with the exception of one position at the high school, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit as they go further on in the presentation. Due to relatively flat enrollment projection, we are only proposing adding 1 teaching position at Marshwood High School. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. This kind of talks a little bit by grade level at the elementary schools. So Elliott Elementary School, for example, 3rd grade next year, we're projecting 51 students, just to kind of give you a sense of class size as it goes by buildings. Really easy to look at enrollment at the elementary school. That math makes a lot of sense when you start adding in at the high school with electives, different offerings, an 8-period, 2-day schedule. There's a lot of other variables, so this one to give you the elementary school. We also have 2 different pieces here. We have our school board policy that is controlled by the board, and we also have kind of state law. And so our pre-K basically says that if we have 1 teacher, we can have 8 students, up to 8 students. If we have a teacher in ed tech, we can have up to 16 students. That's hard and fast. So if we have 9 students, that means we have to have 2 staff members in there. Our district policy for kindergarten and grade 1 is 14 to 18 students. Grade 2 to grade 5 is 18 to 22 students. Grade 6 to grade 8 is 18 to 25 students. Grade 9 to grade 12 is 15 to 25 students. The way our policy is written, we also have the flexibility to go 1 below or 1 above. One of the standing things that the board has always supported is that sometimes we do realize that some AP courses might have lower enrollment. So how do we come up with the individual school service and supply budgets? So this year, at the elementary schools, every student is given a dollar value. So at the elementary schools, there's a $235 per student dollar value placed on a student. The middle school is $240. A high school, and this is important, the non-vocational students is $285 per student, and the vocational students is $163 per student. Some people might be like, John, why is there a difference? The difference is the vocational students are only here half the time, so they don't necessarily need the same amount of supplies as their traditional students may need. So if you take the enrollment, the projected enrollment at Elliott Elementary School, the 288, and you multiply it by the 235, we come up with a $67,000 supply budget. What we do then is we turn that over to our principals. We allow them to work with their teams within their buildings to be able to create those budgets, and then as we have our budget workshops that come up, that will be the time we would ask questions about those specific areas. For the 2023-2024 school budget, we added an additional $5 per student over what we did in 2022-2023. That's approximately a 2% increase. Again, real numbers. And so, like, John, you could talk about how inflation is impacting us. And here's the story. I want to give you facts. Yesterday, for example, yesterday, February 28th, after a formal bid process, again, we just didn't call WB Mason and say, hey, what do you charge us for a case of paper? This was a bid process. Our costs went from $26.17 per case of paper, $26 for a case of paper, to the lowest bid yesterday was $42. Okay, that is a 61% increase over the year before. Just the reality. Now, look, we can talk about reusing and reducing and not using paper, but the fact is, as a school, you still need paper. Yeah. This is a reality for us. Major cost drivers. So what drives our budget? So as we go through this, first the salary and payroll taxes. These are negotiated agreements. That's an increase of about $210,000. Teachers' retirement. This is something that we were sent a bill from the Maine Public Employees Retirement System saying you needed to give us an additional $126,000 for your contribution to Maine State Retirement. So that's something I don't control. That was a bill that we got in the mail. That was so nice of them. Electricity. $170,000 increase. Boiler at Marshall Middle School. We've talked about this a little bit already, but we're trying to do this in a logical way without having to borrow money. And so we took $75,000 out of our capital reserve account and made a first payment. I'm proposing that we pay another $200,000 as of July 1st to be able to pay for the boiler itself, and then next year we'll pay for the installation of the boiler. It's about a $550,000 project to be able to install a boiler, but we're trying to do it in phases to be able to do it. Now, why are we taking so long if the boiler's not good? The reality is they couldn't install it for us right now. They're so backlogged, the people that we would work with. And the good news is they feel like our boiler can last another year. And if it doesn't, they have a service agreement. We have a service agreement with them, so if it breaks, they have to fix it anyway, so kind of the pressure's on them, not on us. So this is a tough one. Substitutes. You might say, John, we never talked about substitutes before. Employee absenteeism. I read in this, and I want to be really clear, this is not a slight on anybody, this is a fact. That the state of Maine made the decision to give every full-time employee 5 earned paid leave days a year. And that is a huge shift in education. So staff members have 5 days that they're able to take, and there's some caveats within the contract, but by law, they can have those, and obviously they have the right to take those. So if we look at 2019, and so we want to measure from September 1st to December 31st. John, why did we choose 2019? Okay, well, it's before COVID. Right? So let's take COVID out of the equation for a second. So this was September through January, or through December. And what did the number of days absent look like? So you can see Elliott Elementary School over that first semester, and when you use that term, about 1,200 days absence total. That same time frame this year, talking over 1,800 days absence. Just a fact. That does not include COVID days, because the other thing that the state of Maine has done, right or wrong, is they've said every employee gets 15 days in perpetuity for COVID-19. And so even though the pandemic is over, those 15 days continue on, so we have to track those days. And so the days that you see in green are COVID days. So these red days are not COVID-related days. They're just regular sick days or personal days, whether you're paid days, what have you. So obviously there's been a dramatic increase. It is what it is. It's a fact. And so because of that, we've been able to use some of our grant money to have the full-time subs that we've had in our buildings. Speaking with the principals, that is critical to us being able to function in a school. So that's where that money comes from, I think additional $98,000 for the 5 full-time subs. Health insurance. This is the tricky one. We'll dive into this a little bit deeper. You ready to get confused? We're going to go into the weeds a little bit right now. So when we talk about health insurance increase, the term medical loss ratio is what they like to use. And so basically what that says is for every dollar that we put in, a certain percentage of that money goes to other things. And so in 2019, so that runs from January 1st to December 31st, we had a 92% or 92.4% medical loss ratio. So that basically meant that every dollar that we put in, 92 cents of that dollar was put towards medical issues. But there's also kind of the management costs that the MBA Benefits Trust requires. And so because of that, we spent more money than we brought in because our addition of the management costs plus the money that we paid out, and I want to be clear that that's the district and employees both paying into that together, resulted in a 5.8% increase in our premiums. Fact, it's just a reality. So that's a tough number. So like you take that 5.8% increase, that's approximately a $250,000 swing for us budget-wise, just the approximate numbers. 2020, and this is what, now we're getting into the COVID. Every dollar that we put in, 75 cents of that dollar was spent on our medical issues. That added with the management costs, we spent less than we did, and so we got a 0% increase. So that kind of gives us that 75 is good. So in my mind, 92 is not good, 75 is really good. I feel good about that. 2021, again, 75% medical loss ratio, we did not see an increase. This year, our medical loss ratio is 73.66%. Logic would say we have a chance of being 0 again. Like I feel pretty good about that, I just don't know. And so for me to sit here and say it's going to be 0 and have to come back to you in 2 months and say, sorry, I was wrong. I felt like it was necessary to put a 2% increase in there just to give us some room, and that's about a $90,000 pot of money that we need to put into the budget. And then once we get those numbers in April, we'll have a better idea what the real numbers are going to be. Yep. But this is a placeholder right now. The other thing I just don't know about is that the inflation factor here is that, I'm sure in January things cost less than they did in December. So how is the MBA Benefits Trust going to factor that in when they talk about the ratios next year? I don't know. We have no control over it. But I just, so part of me feels like I feel really good about it. Other part of me is like, I just want to be careful. So I just want to be conservative. District goals, and so basically this is $217,000 in stuff that is really, this is what we have control over. These are things that we felt like were important. That's all important, excuse me. So let's go to the district goals. District goals, students are the reason for our work. Their voice, input, and active engagement is vital to our continued improvement. Their success is how we measure our success. Again, let's go back to the strategic plan. Kind of the 8 rings, or the 6 rings: safety, positive relationships, character, student voice, equity and support, excellence and learning. Those all sound very familiar, I'm sure, because we talked about it a lot. Community and staff work together to ensure the success of the students. And then our financial resources, time resources, and human resources all go into making that model. So excellence in learning, my recommendation. I'm asking that we hire a half-time math interventionist at Marshall Middle School. The cost of that is $21,250. Currently, there is no direct math intervention at Marshall Middle School. So if a student's struggling, we've created the AES block that occurs, but there is not a person that for instance, during a portion of the day where they could say, we're going to come and we're going to work on long division. We were talking about that during the school meeting. So if we want to be able to get a half-time position where we can have kids have the opportunity to work on some skills that we may need to develop. Currently, we have the AES block, where the other answer is to stay after school. And then if you talk about the staying after school piece, there's a systematic bias to that, right? So we've got to be able to balance that. Sure, that for some students, that's okay. And for other students, we have the late bus, but it doesn't work for everybody. Right? And so we're trying to find that middle ground. So a half-time position. This is the big one. The health teacher at Marshall High School. And so, as you saw before, this is the increase in staffing. numbers are slightly down. I certainly understand that enrollment it has dropped at Marshall High School from last year, from this year to next year. I'm fully aware of that. But this is based on data. The cost for that is a $95,000 position. And there's a lot here. And it's not super positive. The proposed position will be focused on transitioning students from Marshall High School in order to make connections and better educate students. So when we send students from Marshall Middle School to Marshall High School, we want them to feel part of Marshall High School. We want to give them the skills to be successful. We want to create those opportunities to be engagement, to give them the skills that they need to be able to be functioning students at Marshall High School. So that's a really important part of that. John, why do you think that's an issue? Well, I'm going to dive into it. We did the Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, and I just want to be clear that that was done in the fall of 2021, so that was in the midst of the COVID pandemic. It was done in November, 18 months ago, 16 months ago or so. Just want to kind of give you like a piece back in time. Is that like that's when we were in the middle of having the discussion, do we want to have a prom? Do we not have a prom? Like it was really, students were screaming for more. They needed more. We had desks 6 feet apart. We were going in the cafeteria, taking attendance. Everybody had a assigned seat. You know, kids didn't feel like this was a school as they knew it. So 66% of the students at Marshall High School felt connected to an adult in the building. Okay, 66% felt like they were connected, but flip that around, 34% didn't identify that. That's very concerning. And so this position, you know, and maybe someday we start talking about a freshman academy to really have that solidified freshman experience, which is kind of the hybrid between, you know, a Marshall High School model and a Marshall Middle School model, but a nice transition piece. This is part of what that position would do. 45% of the students at Marshall High School felt sad or hopeless almost every day. 45%. State average was 36%. 24% of the students at Marshall High School seriously considered suicide within the last 12 months. State average is 18%. This is the stuff that keeps me up at night. Breaks my heart even saying it. 23% of the students at Marshall High School have used a vaping product in the last 30 days. And so part of this position will also be an increase in health education requirements. The state of Maine is having that conversation right now where they're talking about mandating an additional half a credit towards graduation. We want to be ahead of that, and we want to focus on vaping, drug use, marijuana use, really, you know, creating some programmatic points in time to be able to help our students make better decisions, we hope. 24 of the students at Marshall High School have used marijuana in the last 30 days. Marijuana's a tough one. It's a mixed message, right? You know, it's a mixed message, but you know, data is the data. 25% of the students at Marshall High School have used alcohol within the last 30 days. 1 in 4. 1 in 4 students. So basically you're seeing approximately, you know, it says, John, why is this important? This is why it's important. The other thing is adding a .8 special education teacher at Marshall Middle School. And the cost is about $76,000. Philosophy. We believe it's critical that whenever possible, have students with their peers and friends in the Marshall community. The creation of this position affords students the opportunity while being fiscally responsible by reducing the number of out-of-district places. So what does that all mean, John? What it means is that we have students we want to keep in district, and rather than having them go to a school out of district, we want to be able to create a programmatic, appropriate setting for students within our school buildings and still allow them to be part of the Marshall Middle School community. That's really important. Not only benefits every child in that building. At the same time, a secondary part for me is that fiscally, it makes a lot more sense because we're talking about $78,000 where a single out-of-district placement could cost upwards of $140,000. Real numbers. Yep. Real numbers. We're going to go into the weeds again, so forgive me. How are we going to pay for this? Currently, we have 2.5 ed tech positions at Central School that are denoted strictly for the pre-K. So remember I talked about the pre-K that we needed to have a teacher and in ed tech to have 16 students. Our trending numbers have gone down a little bit as far as what our pre-K numbers are. And so currently we have 8 students out of district that go to our pre-K at Central School. And so that's totally within the law. It's actually written into the law that, you know, that we are welcome, that people are welcome to ask us if we have space, we can accommodate that. But what we found is that that doesn't necessarily pay for a position. that money that we take in for that because of the receivership that we have. And so what I want to do is remove this position and move it now to Marshall Middle School. So basically, it's a swap, first swap. What does that mean? So currently at Central School, I'm going to do the math really quickly in my head, but a full-time position in a full-time ed tech allows you to have 32 students per full-time teacher and full-time ed tech. So we have 2 full-time teachers, which is 64 students, plus we would have another half-time teacher that would allow us 8 more students. So that would allow us to have 72 students rather than the 80 students if we had the ed tech in the classroom. So there's a little bit of a calculated risk. So what do we do with that then? What we would do is we would kind of do it a little bit differently, where we would say, here's open enrollment for our residents. And then in June, when we kind of allow people to apply to be able to come to the school, we would have a set number. So we might have to say, when you get to 66 students at Marshwood at the pre-K, we need to stop enrollment in case we have students moving over the course of the year. So we have never had to do that before because in the last few years we haven't had to do that because we've had space. So that's how we would manage that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Positive relationships. I just think this is awesome. Rich and I had a conversation. We talked about it forever. And just like we need to do it. So we have a unified basketball, and again, there's a home game tomorrow. Great opportunity. I would really recommend anybody going. But how do we expand that? So Rich said, look, unified bocce is really the next decision that that's the next step that we would take. So that's about a $2,300 cost. Now, John, where does that number come from? How we would have to do that is that we would have to create new opportunity points. Contractually, we have a listing of all of the opportunities we have within our teacher's contract. But we have the flexibility to try things out with a new opportunity point. So we would kind of create that opportunity to see how it goes. If it goes well, then that's something that we would put into the, as we talk about the contracts next year, we would have those discussions then or in the future. So we would start off with like a new opportunity points opportunity to see how it goes. I think the other is the esports club. This is really big with the MPA now. This is growing drastically. And I just think if we're going to talk about engagement, we're going to talk about feeling like you belong, there's a segment of kids maybe who don't really necessarily want to go play soccer, but this is maybe their passion. This is an opportunity to be a part of a team, to be engaged, to work with adults, and to feel a real part of Marshwood High School. So again, we would do the same path. We would talk about a new opportunity option. We would see how it goes next year, and then we would kind of go from there once we collect the data. Similar to how we do any of our sports. We do it with volleyball. We've done it with lacrosse years ago. Safety. This is nothing fun about this. $50,000 increase to our premium is what we're expecting. That's the potential. And so we obviously had a big incident at Marshall Middle School, about $180,000. We recouped from our insurance regarding the mold almost now 18 months ago. Now we have to pay for that. So it's about a $50,000 increase in our premiums is what we're expecting. That number may change slightly. New facilities truck. Just really feel like we're really blessed that Todd has joined us, and he can do a lot of the work for us now. And so we feel like if we give him the tools to be able to do that, give him a truck to be able to put tools in, to be able to go from building to building, there's projects that can happen over the course of the year. Right now, we have situations where we're paying mileage. We are, if there's an accident in the truck, there's liability concerns for the district. We have trailers that we really have no way to tow in the district right now. And so when we have to do the tents, for instance, it's a circus to try to move all the tractors around and everything else because we don't have that ability. So having that, doing a 5-year lease for a facilities truck is something we feel like is really important. It will pay off more. So happy that we were able to be 100% compliant with the water testing. It's a great thing. There are other districts who are in very, very dire straits, but here's the negative side of that. All these point-of-use filtration systems we're putting in have a cost. And so we're going to have to spend money to put new filters in and change those on a regular basis. So that's about a $15,000 cost. Now look, that's a heck of a lot better than not having drinkable water, right? And so that's just perspective, but it is what it is. It's a fact. I did a really poor job with this, and I just feel very badly. I mentioned this at the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting, and I didn't really talk about it enough, so I want to go take a deep dive on this, a bus scraper. Because if I saw that, I'd be like, what? What do we need that for? That's how I would feel. I'm going to be totally honest with you. But sometimes one of my inherent weaknesses is that I jump to the end of the book and don't tell the whole story, so I want to tell you the story. It's a $32,000 cost. Forgive this. Hold on. So this is what the process looks like now. So we take roof rakes, we go down and we pull off all the snow off the base. This is about 3 inches of snow on top of a bus. I'm 6'4", so I'm pulling this off the bus, and we're talking about doing that for 30 vehicles. First of all, we have bus drivers that are probably, not to stereotype, but 115, 120 pounds, maybe 5 feet tall. So it's a very different thing that we're asking people to do. So I want you to see what it looks like. And here's the reality. We have to have a crew come in to be able to clean these buses off. That's a reality for us. We can't mandate that everybody comes in because there is a physical component to this. It's hard enough to find drivers as it is. So the average age of our cleanup crew is 63 years old. We have about 11 people on the cleanup crew. The average number of snow cleanups per year, and I don't mean like 2 inches, I'm talking about a shovelable snow, is about 12. And so don't forget, like, if you have a snowstorm that goes over 30 hours, maybe that, we take the buses out, we might have to do 2 cleanups of the buses over one storm. So that's about 12 as we kind of looked into the data. The scraper will cut the cleanup crew in half. So 5 drivers times 30 hours, $30 an hour, which is kind of all things included, insurance, everything else. 4 hours times 12 cleanups is about $72,000 a year that will, $7,200 per year that we'll save. So this would pay for itself in about 5 years. Secondary to the important part. The important part is that we want to keep people safe. So I'm really concerned that we have people pulling that snow down on top of themselves, and someone's going to get hurt, or someone is going to exert themselves to the point where they're going to have a medical emergency. That really concerns me. This year alone, we had a driver out for a week because they injured themselves cleaning off the buses. Like that's a fact. So if we have a driver out, that means we can't get kids to school on time. There's an issue. It's not like that we have a bullpen of 8 drivers that we can kind of pull from to be able to do these things. This is a reality for us. The other part to this is if you look at this bus, this is the one that I cleaned off, and I'm a tall guy, but you can still see there's probably 2 feet, 18 inches to 2 feet of snow in the middle of that bus. There's a liability portion to this, is that we're driving down the road with this on top of our buses, this blows off onto somebody else's car, and there's an accident. There's liability for the district. And so from a safety perspective, it really creates a serious situation. So obviously, you drive through, you push it off. It's a much different thing. So I'm sorry that I didn't explain it well the first time, but there's a lot that kind of went into my thinking. This is something that has kind of been on the radar for 10 years. We kind of talked about it a while ago, decided like now that it wasn't the right time. But as we get more and more concerned about our drivers, the number of drivers that we have, we've got to ensure that they're safe and taken care of. We also got to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to keep everybody around us safe. So. We did have a reduction in propane costs to help offset these costs, which is about $26,000 in savings. Reduction in natural gas usage, which is about $10,000 in savings. We paid off 2 bus leases, which is about $59,000. Character, we kind of go back, that it's really important to have that real-time student remediation. We can't have kids start to fall behind and feel poorly about themselves, and then all of a sudden why kids don't feel engaged. If kids are struggling, there's got to be a hand there right away to be able to help them, make sure they feel engaged, feel supported, they matter. Mental health first aid is something we'll continue to work on. Trauma-informed practice, this is something that that we've talked a lot about. We incorporate, but sometimes you use these words, and then all of a sudden you're in the real life situation. What does it really look like? And so we need to really think about not only the tools, but how do you apply those tools? Continue relationship with Sweetser, and so Sweetser provides outside counseling services for our students. It's been really difficult. Literally after 10 years of Sweetser banging on the door saying, please let us in Marshwood High School. My first year superintendent, we allowed them to come in Marshwood High School. Then they couldn't hire anybody. So now we have this huge void where we have students. I mean, if you talk to any of the counselors, you talk to the social workers, there's a huge void that we have students who need help right now. We can't even get a Sweetser worker to work in here right now. We're fortunate we just hired someone at the middle school about 3 months ago, but that is a challenge. I think we applied for a grant with them. We did not get the grant. So. Our accounting system, just again, increase in costs. $30,000. How do we help pay for this? And the fiscal responsibility, you know, we did have a reduction in legal costs, which I think is fascinating that we had a reduction. So this is really important. And look, I live in this community. Like I get my real estate taxes like everybody else does. Yeah, do I say to myself, gosh, that's, you know, that makes me pause? Of course it does. But I think there's this narrative out there that we just are willy-nilly spenders. And I really want to be clear that that's not the case. Is how do I show that? Rather than me just saying it, let's talk about facts right now. So this dotted line is what the average per pupil, so pure student, what each school district that sends students to the SRTC spends. Here's the dotted line. It's even better. Okay, great. So you can see, you know, here's Kittery, here's York, here's Wells, here's Kennebunk, here's Sanford, here's Massabesic in the green, here's Noble in the maroon, and here's us in the purple. Is the average in the state of Maine. So we are not only below the average for the SRTC schools, we're below the average in the state of Maine. So I want you to think about the cost of educating a child in southern York County, then it may be very different than in Waterville or Augusta or other parts of the state. So there's a cost factor when it comes to this part of the state, right? That includes, you know, the cost for employees. There's a difference there. Mm-hmm. And so I take this role of being fiscally responsible to heart. And it's important because I owe it to the community because I think it's the right thing to do. But at the same time, I just feel like there's a narrative out there sometimes that just does not paint the accurate picture. I'm not saying that it's easy. I understand that, but I just think it's important for people to understand. Here's facts. This isn't John making up numbers. This is you know, there's a website down below, but if you want to be able to look at it yourself, you certainly can. Capital improvements. We're going to talk about this tonight because it's on the agenda for a vote, because I think it's important that we do it right away. But we're talking about a 10-year lease to be able to do an LED lighting project across the district. The cost of the project is $90,000. There's a projected savings of $100,000. I have not taken the $10,000 out of the budget. I just don't feel comfortable doing that. I feel confident that it will pay for itself, because part of this $719,000, there's also money that we got from Energy Efficiency Maine to help offset the cost of that. But at the worst case scenario, it's going to be budget neutral. I think it will be better than that, but let's just, and John, why do you say that? Well, because we've already seen the benefits of what's happened in Marshall High School. There's a kind of a track record. A little bit different here because outdoor lighting makes things a little bit funky. And so we need to kind of look at the outdoor lighting a little bit differently. But I do think worst case scenario, we're budget neutral. But let's put the budget aside for a second. We've created a better learning environment for our kids. That's the big idea, right? So we've done it in a way that doesn't cost any more money, and we made it better for students. To me, that makes a lot of sense. The cupola at Elliott Elementary School, in tough shape. We've got to clean it up. We've got to be able to take care of it. Like if we're going to have these beautiful buildings, we've got to take care of them. So this is about a $15,000 cost to be able to manage this. Again, this is an estimation, but that needs to be taken care of. The picture doesn't do this justice. So imagine 5, 4, 6-year-old children using the stand-up urinals and how those floors must just smell delicious. So this is something we've got to address. We've got to be able to put an epoxy floor down to be able to get rid of any seams in the floor, that we don't have to refinish, and we can handle on a regular basis, and much less maintenance, creates a better environment for the kids. There's nothing wrong with the fixtures. You know, we'll do a little bit of beautification in there, painting, those types of things. But putting those floors down in the building, you know, there's about a $30,000 cost. Delicious was a bad word, I'm sorry. So I don't want to be the person that said, let's take down the clock tower. All right, like that's the fact, right? And so I remember, I'm going to go back now, probably 5 or 6 years ago, Heidi called me on a Sunday afternoon, or I think it was Sunday afternoon, said, John, there are like 6 garbage cans sitting on the floor at Marshwood Great Works School in the gym because it was pouring water down through during a basketball game. Like that was a fact. It's not much better with this. And so right now, when we get heavy rain, it's a sieve. Rain pours in, it's a problem. And so you might think, well, that's, all right, well, let's just fix it, that's easy. But here's the hard part. How do you get up to it? Because there's no ladder in here. There's no ladder on the outside, so if you want to do that, you've got to go halfway up a set of stairs, you've got to put staging up, and you create a pretty hazardous situation. So this $50,000 is creating a way for us to access this on a regular basis. That's part of what we need to do.
Yeah.
We need to obviously take care of this and fix it, and we also need to make sure that maybe the time is right every so often rather than twice a day, just to find us. So that's about a $50,000 project. This is a little bit different strategy, and so the budget was 98% done, and you know, Heather Webster sent me an email basically saying, hey, great news, we got 2 buses, and I was like, ugh. Oh, I guess that's good. That means the state's going to give us money for it, because I had taken the buses out of the budget, to be honest with you. But I felt like we hadn't, this is an approximation, but we hadn't received state subsidy for buses in almost 8 years. And so when the state's giving us money to pay for the buses, we need to take that money, in my opinion. So I included it in the budget, but here's the strategy. Subsidy is a year behind. And so us saying this, that we can order it next year, means the following year we'll get the money.
Yeah.
And so what we had done in the past is that we would put the lease amount in the budget, and we would kind of pay it a year ahead. So we would pay it down, and the subsidy would kind of catch up with us. So year 6, basically 6 years out, we would get reimbursed for the 5 years that we had spent, or our portion of that, which is it's not dollar for dollar. What we're going to do is we're going to order the buses, but we're going to push off the lease payments until July 1st the following year, so that the bus payments and the subsidy are aligned with each other. But we're still going to order the buses, so we're able to do that, and that just makes things a little bit cleaner. So there is, just so I'm clear, so there is no increase for buses in the budget for this, but it will be the following year. We have some old windows at the Marshall Great Works School. So this is the new band room, which is kind of basically the old workshop area that we turned into a band room. But these windows are they're not energy efficient by any means, and so we need to get those fixed. And so this is the type of project that that we're hoping that Todd can do for us, that we can order the windows and we can have those installed ourselves and save a lot of money. It's expensive, to do that. So that's about a $15,000 project, and maybe a little bit more than that. We haven't got the final price on the windows themselves, but they are not cheap right now. So where are we for next year? Projected enrollment is 215 students, which is about a 33% decrease. So we're talking about 0.33, sorry, 0.33, that's a big difference. 0.33% decrease, and so we're talking about 6 student difference from where we are currently. What I'm recommending is a 3.24% increase to the overall budget, which would be about a 3.97 increase that we would pass on to the towns. One of the things that I think it's important that we take this opportunity to say, like, where are we going to be 5 years from now? So long-term capital improvement plans. So we need to make the sustainability, reuse, recycle as part of what we do, and so we need to continue to put that as a priority. Is there opportunities that we can take to be able to do that in a way that doesn't adversely impact our ability to put money into the classrooms as well? So we're trying to find that balancing act. Obviously the natural gas boiler that we talked about, the school buses that we've talked about. I'm going to go back to my time as an athletic director. I don't talk about it very often, but you quickly as an athletic director realize that you can't buy 85 football helmets in 1 year, right? You don't have the budget to do that, but you can buy 8 every year for 10 years, right? So that's kind of that more proactive approach, as opposed to, oh my gosh, all of our football helmets failed inspection and now we have to buy 80 of them. And so we're trying to get on a rotating basis for those types of things. So we need to seal all the bricks at the Great Works School. So we're going to go around and we'll rent a lift. A lot of this we can do ourselves, but we're actually going to spray down sealant on those bricks. Roof repairs at the middle school. This is an ongoing issue. We have to stay on top of those roofs. The foyer at Marshall High School is something that we want to look at. Is there a way to be able to do that that's safer? That's something that we're trying to address. That's going to be a costly project. Right now, as you walk into Marshall High School, you really kind of open up into the foyer, as opposed to it would be much better if we could at some point create a doorway so that people could go right into the main office rather than having access to the building right away. And so that's something that we're going to have to look at, but that's a costly project. Replace metal entry doors at Marshall Middle School, and I'm not talking about the front doors, but if you look at some of the side doors, they're rusted, they're horrible, and we have to take care of those types of things. Storage shed at Marshall High School, it doesn't make any sense if we're going to try to take on all these things. We're going to buy a new tractor, and and how do we take care of the fields? Then all of a sudden we're going to just take the tractor, we're going to leave it outside for the next 4 years, and we're going to wonder why it rusts. Like, we got to take care of the things that we buy. How do we prolong and get the most money out of our equipment that we can get? And continue, I want to be able to finish the Marshall Gray Works School. So we spent a lot of money a few years ago kind of doing those wings. We just didn't finish the backside, which is kind of the technology area in the new band room, so we want to be able to finish those. 2025, 2026, again, we're going to, sustainability is part of it. We want to get on that 2-year buying cycle with our buses, and so we used to go 3 buses, then 2 buses. We feel like we can really go to 2 buses a year rather than going to 3, then 2. We put a lot of money into getting our parking lots in all of our schools redone. I mean, if you remember going to Marshall Middle School, it was cracked, it was a mess, it was falling apart. Put a lot of money into that. We now got to seal those things. We want to protect that investment as long as we can. Roof repairs, depot road drainage issues. We're going to have to work with the Elliott Public Works Department, but if you look at the driveway, the backside of the school, there's a pretty rocky area that needs to be addressed with a culvert, and so we'll have to figure out how that is going to happen in the future. Outdoors at Central Elementary School, replace exterior fencing at Marshall Middle School and the windows at Marshall Middle School. So we'll start continuing that window project. We did the 7th grade wing last year as part of that little project that we did. Again, same type of idea. This is kind of a list of things that the 3-bay garage at the high school, downstairs bathroom at the Great Works School, those are pretty dated right now, so we want to be able to get that on our agenda as to how we take care of it. Window project at the elementary school, and then this is going to be a big one. It's a tough one too, is the replacement of the gymnasium floor at Marshall Middle School. So right now, maybe we can get one more sanding out of that, but it is so thin that those, basically the boards are non-existent. The hard part is if we were to pull that up, you're still on a slab, and so if you were going to put a new floor on, you'd have to raise the floor up 4 inches, and that would create an issue where you'd be tripping over it all the time, so we may have to actually get rid of the concrete, and so it's a pretty serious job to be able to do, so we're going to be looking at that in the future. Trying to hold off for as long as we can, but it is certainly an issue.
Just so everyone knows, that's the inside of the clock tower at the Great Works. When we say there's no way to get up into like the actual clock area, there's a little trap door right at the very top of that ceiling. Yep. So that's how you get up there.
I am not climbing up there, I'm just telling you. I don't even think I'd fit through the door anyway. Again, one of the things we have to keep in our mind all the time is the overboard discharge. And this is kind of our long-term plan, but the reality is things come up. And so, the decision to lower the lead standards in water for schools, that's a significant impact for us. So we had to come up with money, up to $20,000 to be able to replace all of these faucets at the point of these filters. And then we have to budget for the filters themselves. The PFAS system that we had to put in at Marshall Middle School was about $35,000. And so those things kind of come up periodically. So we have to be prepared to deal with those. But these are kind of like, as we start to think about those bigger projects down the road, what do those look like? So I really felt like it's really important to take that 5-year look at the capital improvements, but we don't really ever talk about the programmatic improvements. Like where do we see programmatically? Where do we need to go in the future? So rather than kind of putting a time frame on it, it's more short-term ongoing, and then kind of the long-term things we have to look at. So short-term, we need to review graduation requirements, including multiple pathways and SRTC. We kind of go back to, can we give people credit, for requirements through SRTC rather than just electives? Those are questions that we're going to have to answer. Sustainability initiatives, we need to look at that. How do we continue to evolve? We really got to build stronger community partnerships. This is a really important part of our work as we go forward. We need to maintain our robust extracurricular programs. What do remediation and extension opportunities look like? This is an evolving piece. A more inclusive model of special education, and that's really, that is going to be one of the #1 priorities as we go into next year for me personally, is that how do we make sure those students are getting what they need? And so really that's a really important part of making some changes in maybe how the function of the building may work. And so when you start playing with schedules, start playing with things, that's when people get nervous, right? But this is part of, we have to evolve in special education. Meaningful connections with every student. I mean, that will be a priority at all times. How do we continue to make that happen? Safety for all. you know, this is something that we value. You know, people need to be seen, heard, and valued. Like that is why we do what we do. Summer programming. This is a little bit tricky because we've been kind of propping that up over the last couple of years with the ESSER monies that were available. And so if we're going to continue to have a robust summer program, we're going to have to put some money into that to be able to do that. And so that's something that as a board that we're going to, you know, you all will have to talk about over the next couple of years. We're okay this summer, but going forward it'll be something on the docket for sure. We have a 2-year grant for the ELO program. Do we want to continue that? Are we getting the bang for our buck out of that program? Is that important? You know, what does that look like? For me, one of the gaps at Marshall High School that it's kind of been like one of those unspoken things is that like we kind of have these internships that the kids have, but who's really responsible for that? So maybe we are able to address those types of things under that ELO lens altogether, and at the same time building those community partnerships. So just some things to think about as we go forward. Maintaining and expanding our outdoor educational opportunities. We need to evolve with our SEL program, and we need to enhance our health curriculum. Kind of more longer term. Use student voice to build opportunities to meet the main learning results, but remain compelling to students. What do students tell us that they want? Like there isn't just one pathway to be able to meet competencies. Like, is there other ways that we can do that to be able to allow students to customize their education to a point where we can still meet the standards, but at the same time make it more meaningful and valuable for them? What do those opportunities look like? We've got to remove systematic barriers that become obstacles to student learning. What are the things that we've always done just because that's the way we do things? Like, we need to address those types of things and say, wait a second, there might be a better way. Why do we do this? Well, this is the way we've always done it, and that's just not necessarily a great answer. Explore extended pre-K opportunities, and that might be for some students, for all students, I'm not sure, but I think there's an opportunity there to be able to meet students where they are and to be able to build some positive momentum as they enter kindergarten. We need to refine and update the Marshall High School Program of Studies. This is really important. You know, and I wish there was more that we could do right away, but I think this is going to be more organic. But we've got to review, support, and enhance those capstone experiences for each building. What are those things that you want all students at Marshall Great Works School to experience, at Central School to experience, at LA Elementary School to experience, at Marshall High School to experience? What are those things? Because if we value those, let's talk about it and ensure that all students have those opportunities. You know, we need to address the deficit in pre-K to grade 5 health. I mean, the bottom line is that we put a lot of pressure on our school counselors and say, we meet some of those competencies through their work that they do, through their programming, but I don't think that's necessarily enough. So that's some work that we need to address. What does that look like and how do we support that? You know, we need to use data to inform our instruction. And this is a big one because it's hard because they've changed the assessment system for the state again, right? So this is really going to be the first year of the new test in May, or April and May. And so we have to be able to get the 3 years worth of data, and then how do we take that data and make it meaningful for our staff and for our students? It needs to inform our instruction. Changes in state subsidy. So FY23, the current year that we're in, state general subsidy was about $7.8 million that we got from the state of Maine. The state special education subsidy was about $4.5 million. And please, when I round off, it's just easier for me to say it that way. I'm not diminishing the fact that $61,000 is a lot of money. Please understand that I'm just trying to make it more simplistic. The Elliott contribution is about $10.6 million. South Burke contribution is about $8.6 or $8.7 million. And then other revenues, which is basically like our Rollinsford agreements, is about $2.6 million. So for a total budget of basically $34 million. Next year, our state subsidy dropped considerably for FY24. There was about a $200,000 drop in that. The state subsidy for special education went up about $467,000. Our Elliott contribution, we're asking that that go up $428,000 roughly. South Burke contribution is about $338,000. Other revenues, we expect that to go up about $100,000 for an increase of about $1.1 million. That's the 3.2% overall increase to the general budget. I gave you all packets, so you could write notes on it. I just wanted to give you the presentation right in front of you so you had an opportunity to look at it. I'm sure there'll be questions as you go through it over time. What are we most proud of? Things to celebrate. You know, supporting students and staff emotional well-being and growing as a place where all students and staff are comfortable teaching and learning. That has to be the fundamental belief that you have. we continue to use that strategic plan to be able to guide our decision making. We want to make that a living document. When we have to make those tough decisions, those are the things we fall back on. Those are our core values. I really worked hard at this year, open and honest, transparent communication regarding the budget process. And so we've talked numerous times about the enrollment. We spent time going over how the formula works between Elliott and Southborough. We talked about EPS numbers and how that worked. I'm trying to give you, without getting too deep in the weeds, an overview of like what it went into this budget. Like this is how it works. It's collaborative decision making. As a building principal, most of our principals say, look, this is the money that we have. How do we best use that? What would be most beneficial in your classroom? We don't say you have, $42 for textbooks. Tell us what you need. What do you need to be successful? And again, I'm proud of the work that we do. I really am. The hours that have been spent on putting this budget together, I can't tell you. And when I tell you that we literally at the end of the road are looking for $1,500, that's not a lie. So in a $35 million budget, it came down to that kind of money in order to make things work the way that we're trying to do. Balancing those types of things. Balance programmatic improvement with fiscal responsibility. So that's the presentation. A lot of work went into this. There's a lot of information. We're going to have budget workshops over the next little bit. There may be things you say, this is awesome. There may be things you're concerned about. At this point, I turn the budget over to all of you. This now becomes your budget. We certainly will be here to answer any questions, but I would open it up to let you know that I tried to take the feedback that I received from all of you as a board, the feedback that I've heard from my administrators, the feedback that I've heard from staff, students, and try to create a budget that will be able to meet all those types of needs. So this is hard because you're not going to make everybody happy, but I think I am proud of the work we've done for this together. So I open up if there's any questions.
I think you should be proud of it. There's a tremendous amount of work that went into this, and as a board, I think I can speak for the rest of you, but when I say that we do really appreciate the amount of work and the amount of thought that went into it.
Thank you, Sam.
Looking forward to the workshops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of care went into this. So should we ask our questions later or
Certainly
just
ask
throw it
questions
out?
now if you'd
Well,
like
I think
to.
I'm just going to throw out a couple questions just really quick because I know that the facilities improvements, and I feel like I had heard in other meetings about the tennis courts needing maintenance, and so I didn't
Being done
see.
this summer. Already on the books.
Oh, okay, so it's
Yeah.
from this budget,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And then, because I saw the bocce ball investment in the esports club, but I'm wondering about pickleball, because that's such a hot sport that a lot of
Yeah.
kids want to play, and why the investment was not put into that versus the other.
These are actual teams sponsored by the MPA. The
Oh.
bocce and the, that would be more so intramural. So like for instance, at Marshall Great Work School, Jerry has a pool of points, and if we have kids that want to do pickleball, we do an after-school pickleball club. We can do this. We have that already built into our budget. Those are MPA sanctioned
Oh.
events. That's why we
Okay,
include those.
yeah,
Great
that's
question.
what I wanted clarify.
I did think about, do we want to be able to take one of the tennis courts and turn it into a pickleball court? And I quickly realized that would not work, so never
Oh,
mind.
really?
But yeah,
Oh, really?
but-
Yeah, see, I think it would,
No,
but
it's-
anyway.
Anyway,
For
I
gym
thought about that,
classes.
so anyway.
Yeah, yeah, for gym classes and for extracurricular activities, because part of your goal is to get kids outside in the
Absolutely.
environment and get them moving and having them make connections, and I think that sports like that, that's a great turn on for kids.
I agree.
And it could be for middle school and high school level, because of the buses that we have.
I would say, and I'm sure she won't mind me speaking for her, but Mrs. Carverly would tell you that's probably the most popular activity
Yes,
they do with
yes.
middle school during a physical education
Mhm,
class.
yep.
So even though she gets a 1/10 when she plays, that's okay. But anyway, yeah, other questions people may have?
This presentation will go up on the website?
Tomorrow.
Awesome.
Tomorrow, I'll send a copy of it as well tomorrow to the town of Slippery and town of Elliott.
Great.
That'll be part of our conversation. I probably will not do the whole presentation for them next Wednesday. I'll give them an abbreviated portion. I do want to mention the hard work that Ryan put into this. He's been instrumental in this, Heidi as well. We spent a lot of time going through this, and so they've really just, a great partnership.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
very much.
All right.
so much.
Thank you.
This is incredibly helpful.
So now that I made the school counselor sit through an hour and 10 minutes, I apologize. but we'd love to hear from you. We have a presentation this evening on our social emotional learning work.